What if the thing studying us had a rule? Never be seen, never be found, never let a species know it existed. For that rule to break, after billions of years, something would have to happen that had never happened before. Not on 10,000 other worlds. Not once. This is the story of the one time it did. Dr. Elena Cho had spent 6 years pointing radio dishes at nothing. That was the job. Most of astronomy is patience, wearing the mask of boredom. You aim an antenna to patch the sky. You record static, and you hope that someday, in some tiny sliver of that static, there's a pattern that shouldn't be there. Her father had done the same work, 30 years earlier, at the same observatory in the high desert of New Mexico. He never found anything either. He used to tell her, half joking, "The universe isn't quiet. We're just bad listeners." He died before she got her degree. She kept listening anyway. In March, the automated system flagged an object riding along with a comet swarm passing to the outer solar system, debris from a much larger body that had broken apart centuries earlier. Nothing unusual. Comet fragments got flagged like this every few months. Except this fragment wasn't reflecting sunlight the way ice and rock should. It was reflecting it wrong. Too even, too smooth. Like something built, not something broken off a larger rock by cold and time. Elena almost deleted the alert. Instruments glitch constantly, and a tired scientist learns to distrust her own excitement. But she looked one more time, and one more time after that, and by the fourth look she wasn't tired anymore. She called her colleague, Miguel Reyes, a data analyst 2 offices down who trusted numbers more than instinct. "I think there's something in the comet debris that isn't debris," she said. He laughed. Then he looked at the data. Then he stopped laughing. The object was roughly the size of a small car. It had no visible engine, no antenna, nothing that screamed technology the way movies had trained people to expect. It simply moved with an efficiency that ice chunks don't have. It corrected its own tumble. Twice. Rocks don't correct their tumble. Within a week, 3 other observatories confirmed the anomaly independently. Within 2 weeks, it stopped being Elena's discovery and started being the world's problem. Governments react the way governments always react to something they don't understand. Quietly, then loudly, then somewhere in between. A closed briefing was called. Elena was in the room, mostly to answer questions nobody outside her field could answer. Across the table sat a man named Director Holt, representing an agency whose full name he never gave. "Is it a threat?" Holt asked. Not a question. A demand dressed as one. "I don't know," Elena said. "It hasn't done anything except exist. Things that exist and don't announce themselves are usually hiding something. Or they're just doing their job quietly," she said. "Like we do." Holt didn't like that answer. He wanted a weapon assessment, not a philosophy. That was the first disagreement. It would not be the last, because the closer humanity looked at the object, the less it looked like a weapon, a ship, or a message. It looked like an eye. The breakthrough came from something almost embarrassingly simple. Miguel noticed that the object's faint, structured radio emissions, a whisper so quiet it had been dismissed as background noise, only appeared when a telescope was actively pointed at it. Not randomly, not constantly, only when it was being observed. "It's responding to us looking at it," Miguel said, staring at the readout like it might change if he blinked. "Not to us being here, to us looking." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear exactly, recognition. The feeling of a puzzle piece sliding into a place she hadn't known was empty. "It's a recorder," she said slowly. "It's been recording other worlds. And it just noticed we're recording it back." They didn't know it yet, but they had just described, almost exactly, an old idea from 20th century science. The notion of a passive alien probe, sent out not to conquer or contact, but simply to watch. Scientists have theorized about such devices for decades, machines built to drift for millions of years, quietly cataloging whichever worlds happen to grow something interesting. Nobody had ever expected to actually find one. Nobody had prepared for what it would mean that it noticed them back. Over the following months, the object did not approach Earth. It did not send a message in any language, mathematical or otherwise. It simply held its position at the edge of the solar system and continued its faint, rhythmic pulse. active only during the hours human telescopes were trained on it. The public called it the Watcher before any scientist did. The name stuck because it was accurate. Elena spent those months doing something she hadn't done since her father's funeral, reading his old notebooks. He'd filled dozens of them with half-finished calculations, hopeful sketches of what contact might look like, doodles of dishes pointed at stars that never answered. On one page, near the end, he'd written a single line that she hadn't understood at 17 and understood completely now. Maybe the test isn't whether they find us. Maybe it's whether we ever bother to ask if someone's out there watching. She brought that notebook into the lab the next day, not as evidence, as a compass. Holt's agency wanted to send a probe of their own, armed, cautious, designed to disable the object if it moved toward Earth. Elena argued against it in every meeting she was allowed into, and in a few she wasn't. If this thing has watched other worlds for who knows how long, she said, and it's still out there, quietly recording, never landing, never invading, then whatever species builder decided a long time ago that watching was safer than acting. If we send something armed, we're the ones changing the rules. And if you're wrong, Holt said, and it's the opening move of something worse, then we've already told it exactly what kind of species we are. That argument won, barely, by a margin of one vote in a room that didn't officially exist. The armed probe stayed grounded. A civilian one, unarmed, carrying instruments and nothing else, was approved instead. It was Elena's design. She named it unofficially after her father. The unarmed probe reached the object 14 months later. It carried no weapons, no flags, no grand decorations. It carried instruments, and it carried one deliberate signal, not language but rhythm, the recorded heartbeat of a human being, transmitted on a loop, slow and steady, the most basic proof of life a species could offer. For 3 days, nothing happened. On the 4th day, the object moved, not toward Earth, not away from it. It rotated, for the first time in the entire duration of human observation, to face the approaching probe directly. And then it did something no instrument had recorded it doing in 10 months of study. It stopped being silent. The signal it sent back wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't language, not in any form translators could immediately parse. It was structure, recursive, layered, clearly built rather than natural, and clearly very, very old. It took the combined effort of research teams across 4 countries 11 days to realize what they were looking at. It wasn't a message meant for Earth. It was a record, an enormous one, compressed data stretching back further than anyone could confidently measure, logs in some form of thousands of worlds, atmospheres, chemistries, the faint signatures of life, simple and complex, blooming and vanishing across an unimaginable span of time. 10,000 entries, by the most conservative estimate anyone was willing to publish. Only 3 of them contained anything resembling intelligence. Only one of them had ever pointed an instrument back at the thing recording it. That was the truth the Watcher had been built to find, across a length of time longer than human history, longer than human species, longer than most of the geological record of Earth itself. It hadn't been searching for weapons or cities or broadcasts. Broadcasts were common. Plenty of the worlds in its record had leaked radio noise into space eventually. The accidental kind, the kind that means nothing except we exist and we don't know you're listening. What it had never recorded, not once in 10,000 attempts, was a species that noticed it was being watched, and, instead of hiding or attacking, turned its own eyes around and asked, deliberately, who's there? Not out of instinct, out of curiosity that survived the fear. Elena understood, reading the translated fragments alongside her team, that the test had never been about intelligence or technology or strength. Every one of those things could be measured 1,000 different ways, and none of them had mattered to whoever built this machine. What mattered was whether a species, upon realizing it might not be alone in the universe, chose to look back. Humanity had, not perfectly, not without arguments in closed rooms, without a director who wanted a weapon, without months of fear and disagreement and mistakes along the way. But in the end, they had sent curiosity instead of a weapon. They had answered a whisper with a heartbeat instead of silence. That was enough. The object began to move 6 weeks later, adjusting its trajectory for the first time in the entire span of its recorded presence in the solar system. Not toward Earth, away from it, back into the dark between stars, carrying its 10,000 world record onward, wherever onward meant for something built to outlive civilizations. Before it left, it sent one final transmission. Short, deliberate, not new data. A reply. Compressed, structured, clearly prepared in advance rather than generated on the spot, as if the answer to what humanity would do had already been drafted, long before the question was ever asked. Nobody has explained that part yet. The object is gone now, past the edge of anything human instruments can track. What it left behind isn't a threat, and it isn't a promise. It's a question mark, sitting quietly in an archive, waiting for someone smarter or more patient, or simply luckier than the people who found it first. Elena still runs the observatory. She still points the old dishes at the sky some nights, out of habit more than expectation. Her father was wrong about one thing. The universe isn't quiet, and it isn't just bad listeners keeping it that way. Sometimes, something has been listening back the whole time. It's only a question of whether you ever turn around. What's real? The idea of a passive, autonomous alien survey probe, often called a Bracewell probe in scientific literature, is a genuine concept that has been seriously discussed by astronomers and SETI researchers since the 1960s. The basic reasoning is simple. Sending a slow, patient robotic observer to study a star system is far more efficient than sending a crewed ship or waiting decades for a radio reply across light years. Passive comet and asteroid surveys are also real and ongoing. Telescopes regularly detect and track objects, including unusual interstellar visitors, drifting through our solar system. What's scientifically possible? It's scientifically plausible that if an advanced civilization wanted to study other worlds without contact, an unmanned, long-lived probe would be a sensible tool. It's also true that human radio telescopes could, in principle, detect an artificial object's emissions if they were strong or structured enough, and that an object reflecting light too evenly could raise real scientific suspicion, the same way astronomers have investigated unusual objects in our sky in real life. What's speculative? Whether such a probe could truly remain undetected for eons, whether it could carry a searchable record of 10,000 worlds, and whether its builders would design it to react specifically to being observed are all speculative ideas. They fit within serious scientific thinking about how a truly patient civilization might explore the galaxy, but none of it has ever been demonstrated. What's fiction? The specific object, its behavior, its 10,000 world archive, its final reply, and every character in this story are invented for the purposes of this video. Final verdict. The core idea that a quiet, ancient, patient method of studying the universe might already exist, and that humanity's biggest test might be curiosity rather than power, is grounded in real scientific thinking. The story itself is fiction, but the question underneath it isn't. If something out there has been watching, will we notice? And if we did, will we look back?